Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to this video on the explanation of the circle of fifths, how it's derived from first principles, and perhaps a few other bits of information that may be of some help to you. Okay, so I'm assuming that most people watching this will have some knowledge of scale theory in general and the construction of major scales, but just to go over that, a major scale is constructed with the tonal sequence 2 tones a semitone, 3 tones a semitone. So starting from the lower note, we go up a tone, up another tone, then a semitone, and then we go up a tone, a tone, a tone, and a semitone. That sequence builds as a major scale. The scale of C major is all white notes. It's all the white notes on the piano. So there are no sharps and flats in it, and that's the scale I'm going to start with. I'm going to write that out first of all. Scale of C major. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Okay, so there's no sharps or flats in that scale. Let's write in the tones and semitones over the top. A tone, 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 semitone, a dodgy A there. Okay, so that's the scale of C major. No sharps or flats, same on every instrument. No sharps or flats in the scale of C. I'm going to write out another scale now. Actually, I'm going to write out the scale of G, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that sequence of tones and semitones to see what happens, because if I start on any note and I follow that sequence of tones and semitones, then I must end, if that's a major scale, which it is, then I must end up with another major scale, because the structure will be the same. It's just that it starts on a different note, but all the notes in that scale will be the same distance apart. So here we go. Scale of G, tone above G is A, tone above A, B, semitone, C, a tone, D, another tone, E, another tone. Well, a semitone above E is F, but we want to go up a tone above E, so we're going to hit an F sharp. So in order for this scale to work, we have to have a sharp here at the 7th degree of the scale, 7th note of the scale, and of course the last note will be identical to the first one. Bearing in mind that scale is a series of alphabetical notes is a scale of notes in alphabetical order, starting and finishing on the same letter. Right, let's start on a scale of D and see what happens. On the note D, I should say. So a tone above D, E, tone above E is, well, we know that from here, it's F sharp. So tone above D, above E, F sharp, semitone, G, a tone, takes us to A. Another tone will take us to B. We now want to go up a tone above B. Well, B and C are a semitone apart. We want to go up a tone, not a semitone, so that takes us to a C sharp. And of course a semitone above C sharp takes us back to our tonic note. Let's start on the note A and see what happens. Tone above A is B, tone above B, C sharp, semitone above C sharp, D, a tone above D, E, a tone above E, F sharp. And now a tone above F sharp, well, a semitone above F sharp, if you can think of that, is G. Next door notes, F sharp, G, semitone. We want to go up a tone above F sharp, which will take us to G sharp. If you kind of think retrospectively, F to G is a tone, therefore F sharp to G sharp must also be a tone, and of course a semitone above G sharp takes us to our first notes, A. Oops. That's better. Okay, now I've not picked these notes in some random sequence. I'm sure some of you may already realise that, or in fact know it. What I've done is, when we started out with C, I've picked the fifth note of the scale of C, which is G, and that became the first note of the scale of G. The fifth note of the scale of G is D, that became the first note here. The fifth note of the scale of D is A, that became the first note here. So we can assume then, and rightly assume, that the next note in the sequence will be E. So the notes are a fifth apart. So just to draw some further obviousness to that, if there is such a word. Okay, and then E, E. Right, so we know then that our next scale is going to start and finish on an A, obviously, but we also know that because the seventh note is a semitone before the last note, and the last note is going to be an E, we can then say the seventh note must be a D sharp, a semitone below E. Now there's something else that we can that's cropped up here, because going back here, no sharps, one sharp, two sharps, three sharps, so we can assume then, rightly so, that there will be four sharps here, one of them obviously D sharp. But the other sharps will be the sharps that we've already accumulated. F sharp, that got carried over here, then we've got a new sharp here. Those two sharps got carried over, then we've got a new sharp here. This is in fact the order that the sharps appear on the written music. On the key signature, we always get the F sharp written first, then the C sharp to the right of it, and then the G sharp, etc. So we're going to have four sharps here in the scale of E major. D sharp's the seventh note. We know then we're going to accumulate the F sharp and the G sharp. Next note's going to be an ordinary A. So this scale, as all scales, are the same notes as the previous ones, previous scales notes. Obviously it starts on a different letter, and we've just got the change to the seventh note of the scale being a sharp. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, and there is our scale of E major with four sharps. And just to look at that the other way again, a tone above E is F sharp, a tone above F sharp, G sharp, a tone above, semitone above G sharp, A, tone above A is B, tone above B is C sharp, tone above C sharp, D sharp, and a semitone above, a semitone above D sharp is E. I'm always trying to think in front. Okay, so fifth note of that scale of E is going to be B, so that will be our next note. We know that the last note is going to be a B, and the semitone below B is A sharp, and so then the remaining notes are just the previous scales notes. So we've got already accumulated a C sharp, whoops, and a D sharp. Just give us a sec, neaten that up. B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. Going a little bit out there, aren't we? But never mind. Shall we neaten that up? So, A sharp, oops, B. Not used to writing on chalkboards. Right, so fifth note of the scale of B will be an F sharp. Some of you may realise, know then that B to F is the tritone, the devil in music. So a perfect fifth above B is in fact F sharp, 7 frets, just as they obviously all are. Two frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets. Okay, 7 frets in all. So right, so we know then that the top note will be an F sharp. But just before we calculate the seventh note, I'm going to do this the other way around again. So we know that the previous scales notes are all going to be included. So we've got a G sharp in there. Oops. We've got an A sharp, we've got an ordinary B, we've got a C sharp and a D sharp. So the seventh note of this scale is going to be the next letter, so it must be an E. The scale notes are in alphabetical order, so the next note has got to be an E. Well, you could say that a semitone below F sharp must be F, but then we'd have two Fs in the scale, wouldn't we, if we did that? We'd have an F natural and an F sharp. So if you're writing out music for somebody and you were being strict over it and you're writing out the scale of F sharp major and you wanted to use that system, you'd constantly having to tell the player whether to read the note as an F natural or an F sharp. So the way around that is we don't call it an F, we call it an E sharp. If you think about it as a guitarist, perhaps, if you are one, a semitone above E is first fret. We normally would call that F, but obviously in this case it's an F sharp. Sorry, I beg your pardon, scratch that. A semitone above E in this case will be E sharp. Okay, so that's the seventh note of our scale, E sharp, and harmonic equivalent of F. Okay, so moving on then, fifth note of this scale is C sharp. Top note will be a C sharp. Oops. We can write in the previous scales note, so C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and you may have guessed it already, the last note of that, sorry, the seventh note of that scale is going to be a B sharp, not a C. Just neaten that up. And there's the circle of fifths, sharp keys. Okay, there is the circle of fifths on the other side, the flat keys. I'll just briefly mention that because obviously I started out with the scale of C major because I knew that there weren't any sharps or flats in that. But then we copy down the fifth note, but where did C come from? Which scale has C as its fifth note? Well, we can sort of work our way backwards just for a moment. Well, if C sharp is the fifth note of F sharp, then C must be the fifth note of F, and F must be the fifth note of B flat. B flat must be the fifth note of E flat. Anyway, that's the circle of fifths backwards, accumulating flats on the fourth degree of the scale, not sharps on the seventh degree of the scale as we have here. So let me just further put some detail on this. Okay, so we've accumulated sharps on the seventh degree of the scale. Each scale gets a new sharp on the seventh degree and accumulates the previous scale's notes, and every note of those, they're all major scales and they're all governed by this sequence of tones and semitones, which gives rise to all the other scales and all the chords that are derived from that. Anyway, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Lower tetrachord, upper tetrachord, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone. So a major scale is 4 notes here and 4 notes there, same distances apart, connected by a tone in the middle. Okay, so we can then say that we can just copy down these 4 notes here because they're tone, tone, semitone, and these are, we can just copy the whole bunch down, copy those 4 down to here. It's another way of looking at it. What else do I need to say? Accumulation of sharps on the seventh note. Father Christmas gave Dad an empty box, or Father Christmas gave Dad an empty. Father Christmas goes down all empty buildings, or Father Christmas gave Dad an empty box. It's entirely up to you. Eventually you won't need that mnemonic, it should just become automatic, but that's certainly one way of remembering it. So I hope that's been a benefit to you people out there, and I strongly suggest, to be honest with you, that you watch this video again, because even though you say, or I'm sure many people will think, well yes, I understand that now, that's pretty straightforward, which it is, but being able to think of this while you're on your feet is a different thing. And jazz people learn this, and eventually, I mean, they say that jazz is a language, so you learn all this stuff and eventually it becomes automatic. So I suggest that you get yourself a piece of paper and follow my logic through again with pen and paper. Do it several times. It does take a while for it to sink in. In fact, if I had a penny for every one of my pupils that said in the next lesson, after being shown this, that they can understand it, they know what to do, I asked them to write it out. If I had a penny for every person that said they understood it and didn't, well, I wouldn't be a rich man, but I'd have a heap load of pennies, believe me. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. I don't think I've made any mistakes in the explanation there, just in the writing of the circle of fifths, but I'm not very sure that I mean, it's a cycle of fifths. I don't like to call it a circle, it's a cycle. It moves along in a cyclic way. I hate to see it written out as a diagram just with all the key signatures around the outside. It's not the same, but this logic here, this diagram here, I'm sure shows the absolute logic, simple logic behind the construction of the circle of fifths. And for anybody feeling like they might be able to handle it, try and work yourself backwards. Seize the fifth note of what scale, and then that's the fifth note of what scale, and you use the tones and semitones, and you'll see another pattern emerging with the flats. In fact, the flats accumulate in the reverse order of the sharps. There you go, there's a little hint for you. Anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks very much. Bye bye.